Good morning. Thank you guys for being here today. I am Christine Drazen. I am the House Republican leader, and behind me are House and Senate Republicans. We are here today to talk about the statewide wildfire maps. Today, House and Senate Republicans stand united to address a critical issue that affects all rural Oregonians, our state's defective wildfire hazard maps. Oregonians are increasingly frustrated by the direction the state is moving in, and this map is another example of agency overreach that threatens their day-to-day lives. This map is riddled with inaccuracies and fails to reflect real-world conditions on the ground. No matter how diligently property owners manage their land, reduce vegetation, or create defensible space, their hazard designation remains unchanged. This is not just unfair, it is blatant disregard for common sense. Property owners are understandably scared and confused. They're worried about their lives. They're worried about their future. This map is destroying their property values that they have worked to maintain. They fear fines if they can't comply with the regulations that are tied to these maps. They fear this map is being weaponized to push them out of rural Oregon. These fears are real, and they should not be ignored or written off as misinformation. To the thousands who have written and called our offices, we hear you. Not only do we hear you, we are taking action. That's why we are here today to announce efforts to eliminate the statewide wildfire hazard map. The map must be repealed. It has been universally rejected by property owners across the state, and every day that politicians demand to defend or cling to this map, more time, money, and resources are wasted. It is unfair to place the burden of fuel reduction and wildfire mitigation solely on private property owners, while our state and federal governments fail to steward our forests and public lands adequately. We want to empower local communities and homeowners to take voluntary protective measures, provide on-the-ground assistance, and support property owners when they take steps to protect themselves and their neighbors. After 4 years of chaos and failure, it is time to repeal the statewide wildfire hazard map and embrace common sense solutions that truly address the needs of our rural communities and get Oregon back on the right track. Now, every single member of both of these caucuses standing behind me have heard from their constituents on these issues. And they're going to be more than happy to talk about this with all of you throughout the coming weeks. But today, I would like to introduce you to a few of our members that will be addressing this issue. First, I would like to introduce Senator David Brock Smith, who is the Deputy Senate Republican Leader, Vice Chair of the Energy and Environment Committee, and member of the Emergency Management Committee. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. As Christine said, I'm Senator David Brock Smith, Senate Republican Deputy Leader. I appreciate Governor Brown in her press release this morning regarding this issue. Unfortunately, it falls short of any substance. We are in a situation, as Representative Drazen said, that we're having serious issues with impacts over 100,000 Oregonians and their property throughout the state. What we really need to do is make sure that we do repeal these maps, because the governor's comments in tying wildfire funding to the repealing of the maps is short-sighted. We have an opportunity to repeal the maps with Senator Robinson's Senate Bill 678 as a vehicle to do so. We are supportive of doing that while we continue through the legislative session and dealing with the wildfire funding that Senator Girod and many others are working hard on. We have really the underlying issue, however, though, is, and the data supports on the 10-year average, when you're looking at 13 to 23, 82% of the acres burned in Oregon are on federal land. Of the 18% of acres that are burned on private land, 15% of those fires and acres are coming from federal land. And of the 3% of fires that start on private land, 98% of those acres are kept, burned acres are kept to less than 100 acres because they're managed resources. And so we have an opportunity right now, utilizing Senator Robbins' vehicle of 678, to help over 100,000 Oregonians heal the wildfire hazard maps and associated issues with Senate Bill 80 that was passed in 2023. And we have the opportunity and the collective body in this legislative process to get it done and have the governor sign it before the March 7th deadline, because in her press release does nothing. The appeals still need to get in, but we need to solve this issue now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ruxmith. Next, I would like to introduce you to Senator Noah Robinson from Cave Junction, who has introduced legislation to repeal the statewide wildfire map. Senator Robinson.
Thank you very much, Representative. I would like to emphasize the urgency with which this needs to be done, because this is a very real problem for Oregonians all over in our rural areas. I have heard from constituents who are concerned that they won't be able to live in their houses. Their insurance rates have skyrocketed. They're afraid of what will come next in terms of regulations, intrusion on their private property. And I've heard from people who tell me, my parents left this property to me. I'm planning to leave it to my children. I do not know whether I will be able to continue to afford living here. These are real fears. They're occurring right now. Every day, they're worried. You go to a meeting, Parents Pass, you get more than 1,000 people to show up because they're concerned about this. So these maps, this approach is the wrong approach. We need to address wildfire. That needs to be done, but this is not helping. The maps are riddled with errors. These kinds of computer models, I looked at them carefully, what they've done. I'm a scientist, and it's very difficult to properly model these things, constantly changing conditions, and it's just riddled with errors. You can't get it right. And that's on top of just a simple private property issues. The state wants to come in and tell you what it's going to cost to rebuild, what you're going to have to do. Maybe they want to do things a little differently. It's their property. So these maps need to be repealed as quickly as possible. I think that Bill 678 should be advanced as quickly as possible. And like Senator Brock-Smith said, I would very much like to have that done and signed by the governor before we can have any further harm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Next, I would like to introduce House Republican Assistant Leader, Representative Mark Owens, co-chair of the Agriculture, Land Use, Natural Resources, and Water Committee. Representative Owens.
Good morning. And to all Oregonians that are out there frustrated because they woke up and saw another edition of the map that put them in a high area. Frustrated because they are in a WUI. Frustrated because Oregon, ODF, and OSU said it'd be different this time from 2022. Frustrated because they don't know how to repeal the map, how to get on a computer program, how to help their elderly, the disadvantaged communities actually have impact in this. For all those that are concerned, all those Oregonians that are concerned about the simple fact that fire hardening they had done since the conception of this has not been taken effect. Concerned because they live by federal land, public land that has been mismanaged, and no matter what they do on their land, this will not change their high hazard. Frustrated that they're in a WUI when they don't even know what a wildland urban interface is done. At the original commitment from Senate Bill 762, when we have a good definition of a wildland urban interface, it did not happen. To all those that are scared that they could lose their state, scared that they cannot afford the wildfire hardening, scared they cannot afford the regulation of policy that is coming forward to them, scared of the civil liabilities that can make them go bankrupt. We hear you. We stand collectively today to be your voice. Please help us as we work to repeal the fire maps from 762. For a little history, in July of 2022, 2 days after the maps were issued, former Senator Finley and I hosted ODF, OSU, traveled around to different places in Eastern Oregon, stood in the middle of center pivot irrigation and asked, how is this high? How is this a WUI? They said it was a mistake. Traveled to flood irrigated meadows, asked the same questions. They said it was a mistake. You look back on those maps today, they're still there, or the majority of them are still there. We had a commitment that they'd work with communities, work with counties, put boots on the ground to get these maps right. They did not fulfill that commitment. That is a mistake. These maps are flawed. These maps are dangerous. And if we look towards the long term, Senate Bill 79 that has been introduced in the Senate side this year basically says if you're in a WUI, in a high hazard area, you won't be able to build in Oregon again. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to tell our rural communities? that we want all of us to go to Portland? We all want to be urbanized? No. Please let us be your voice. Please work with us to put enough political pressure to get these maps repealed. It is important, and we want to stand with you. Thank you. Right after this, we're going to have some questions, and then we're going to have an opportunity, if you please stick around, for some commissioners or Eastern Oregon County Association to present their views too. But I'll hand it back to Rick Drazen right now.
Thank you. I just want to address something really quickly, and I'd like anybody that wants to come forward that would like to be available to answer questions, please do so. But I want to quickly address, we saw the governor, which was referenced today, released a press statement saying that she's going to pause the appeals process. You know what I would like to do? Is I would like to invite the governor to formally endorse repeal of the wildfire maps. Oregonians themselves need to see that the politicians here in Salem have heard them. We don't need a delay. We need repeal. And Republicans stand willing to work in a bipartisan fashion to ensure that this faulty, defective, harmful wildfire map is repealed. And we would welcome the governor's support to do so. So any questions?
We'll start with KGW, since you guys are here, if you have any questions.
Sure. How did we get here? Can we go back a little bit? How did all this occur?
Yeah, we have in Oregon a very real need for statewide management of wildfire risk. What we actually need is management of our forests and our working lands. We haven't had that for a really, really long time. And so initially 762 was proposed to get funding and purchase apparatus and support more firefighters in the summer. And it had a lot of things built into that original bill that were intended to be responsive to this idea that Oregon has faced wildfires. It was following the 2020 summer of fires. Unfortunately, also built into that bill was a heavy-handed bureaucratic takeover of the homes in rural Oregon, so that they are dictated to whether or how they live and whether or not they can even live there. And the challenge that we now have is people have been harmed long-term. They have properties that have been identified as high risk. It's hard to sell. They can't get insurance. The challenges that they face in rural parts of the state have caused long-term harm to them. And the least that can happen on the side of policymakers in Salem is to hear those concerns and repeal these maps. Anyone else like to address that?
Only that the Republicans had a competing legislation in 2021 as well. Both went down to Ways and Means. And we attempted to try to move it. If you might remember back in the day, there was a last minute amendment. It was actually language from Representative Owens. Then Speaker Kotek created a committee with days left in session to try to amend the bill because they were going to put the international WUI code in legislation. That would be the first state in the nation to do so, and it would have been much worse than it is.
We now have Alex Bumhart with a question. Alex, I don't know if you heard me there.
Yes, sorry, y'all. Alex Baumhart, Oregon Capital Chronicle. I'm going to avoid my camera because my computer overheats when I use Teams. I have two quick questions. One, when I look at Senate Bill 678, it looks like a total repeal of Senate Bill 762. Is that what you're trying to do, is repeal all of that? Because it was a lot more than the wildfire map.
Let's start with you.
Yes, that's correct. The 678 is a total repeal of 762.
So repeal all the investments in home hardening, community hardening, fire marshal's office.
So my opinion is that the programs in there that may be successful probably ought to be put in a second bill. We can look at those separately. At the same time, the concern is the wildfire maps. So what we need to do is we can repeal 762 completely, which would be my preference, or we can just simply repeal the fire maps. That can easily be done with the bill.
Okay.
Thanks,
my second
Alex.
question.
If I can add to that, I mean, and I appreciate Senator Robinson's legislation and how we can continue this conversation, because as he even mentioned, there are good things and investments in the legislation, and so we have an opportunity to go ahead and look at amendments, if possible, with Senator Robinson on making sure that the priority is repealing the maps and protecting landowners in the state.
Just to clarify that, we also have just a clean repeal bill that is being proposed in the House as well. So the point here is that we have a lot of opportunity. We have opportunities in the Senate, we have opportunities in the House. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, but we stand unified in telling Oregonians that we believe that we can, as a body, in a bipartisan way, repeal these harmful maps. And I also want to, for any Oregonians that might be watching this right now, I just want to remind people, you still need to file your appeals.
Yes.
So please, please, please turn in those forms and file your appeals. Thank you.
Okay, one more quick question while I have you all unified as Oregon Republicans. The Trump administration has issued massive access to federal agencies, including about 10% of the U.S. Forest Service. As a group of people standing here proclaiming to care a lot about how federal lands are managed going into another fire year, can I get a comment on y'all from the Republicans in DC axing the Federal Forest Service going into probably another big wildfire year?
I have every confidence that our federal partners are as committed as we are to ensuring that our federal lands are managed and that we mitigate the dangers of wildfire here in the state of Oregon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, he is a good one. That's a good one.
All right. Any other questions?
I ever do.
One more, we talk about numbers and things like that. Can somebody share a experience, one experience at a family where someone's going through here, instead of a general base wise? Anybody have any examples of a? Yeah.
So here's what we know right now. As we have heard in our offices, we've heard from Oregonians who are on fixed incomes, Oregonians who have been living on their family property for years and years and years and years and want to pass it on to the next generation. They have been telling us that this puts all of that at risk and that they cannot do what's required of them. They frankly shouldn't have to do what's required of them. The mandates that are placed on them to solely be responsible for the fact that our forests and our working lands haven't been managed for decades just isn't fair. And so we have heard from people that recognize that they cannot be responsive to the demands and the requirements of the rules that have come down following their designation on these wildfire maps. But I would welcome Noah or anyone else from your districts. Yeah, Virgil.
Sure.
So we have Representative Osborne coming forward. He just had a conversation in his community with Representative Boyce and Representative Scarlatos and Representative Brock Smith talking to their community about this issue. Thank you, Representative Osborne.
Thank you, Leader. Hi there, I'm Virgil Osborne, House District 2 representative, and yeah, as a matter of fact, Saturday we had a meeting with folks in our district, and you asked for an example, so I'll give you one. I have a constituent that has a ranch that's, I didn't ask how big it is, but I think it's around 200 acres, and some of his kids are already living on it. And he came to me and he said, I can't meet any of this stuff. What am I going to do? He said, the only way I have a chance is to just log all the timber off of it and hope that passes. Well, I don't think that's a good option either. I mean, of course, that's going to destroy the value of some of the land. But he's an elderly gentleman. He doesn't even know how to fill out the appeal form. So it's really commonplace down there. My phone has been blowing up ever since this happened. And we owe it, I think, as legislators to our communities to fix this problem so that we don't have people that are suffering from this. So that's just one example. I could give you probably 10 more, but that's kind of where we're at. Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Any other questions from our folks online?
Diane Lugo with the Statesman Journal. We saw in response to Kotek's announcement this morning, also a kind of a response from Democrats referencing a remonstrance on the floor a couple weeks ago from Senator Golden, saying that he also kind of welcomed a repeal. Can you just speak a little bit about the partnership across the aisle to kind of reach a consensus and how that's looking?
No, I appreciate that. We've been in multiple conversations with Senator Golden about this issue and making sure that there is the opportunity to have that bicameral, bipartisan support on the repeal of the maps. I think the devil's in the details because it's just not the maps. There's other pieces of the appeal process itself that, again, are tied into Senate Bill 80 that passed in the 23 session. But I know that Senator Robinson has been talking with the senator as well. So
Yes, I had, of course, talked to Golden as well, and he has indicated that he's interested in doing something about it. We do need a complete repeal of the maps and all the associated things that go with that, because we have insurance rates are up. Of course, insurance rates are up for a lot of reasons. But when you tell people, and you tell the insurance company that if you have to build back after a fire, you're going to have to do all sorts of special things. You draw attention to it. We don't really, and they don't know what it'll look like. That raises insurance rates. There's the question of what it will cost just to do the mitigation. There's many examples. I've talked to people who say, my property's perfect. I cleaned up all the brush. Everything's the way they want it. And I got this document. And so it's everywhere. And so we need a complete repeal of it. Yes, we welcome input from anybody on this. So if any of the Golden, any of the other Democrats are interested in working with us, we're definitely there to do that.
Any other questions?
The last thing I would say on this one is this going to be a bipartisan effort? It will be. And the reason why is all of our Gogonians out there that have raised their voices. All the Oregonians and the grassroots efforts that have sent thousands of emails that brought this to attention. It is not us behind us, the Senate R's and the House R's that are leading this charge. There's our communities that are leading this charge, and your voices continue with why this is bipartisan. And we saw Governor Kotek first start to address that. The public opinion on this is negative, and it needs to stay negative until we get a full repeal.
I have a question. I write for American Thinker. I want to know why it's falling on the residents of Oregon to do all of this when the state refuses to cut fire breaks every certain number of miles. With the California wildfires and everything else, if they would have had water and fire breaks, they could have stopped them. If we decide that, if you're talking about the residents having to take care of wildfires, why isn't the state cutting fire breaks and making sure that those fires do not jump them?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is why we're here today. It's because we believe that this is an unfair burden on Oregonians themselves, and that our federal lands need to be managed. Our state lands and our federal lands, our public working lands, have got to be managed differently. Handing this over to Oregonians and telling them that this is their responsibility and that the state and the federal lands can continue to be in disrepair isn't fair. And these maps have got to be reversed. We have an opportunity to get this done before the deadline for these appeals are closed. We have the opportunity, if it's bipartisan in nature, which I believe that it will be, we have the opportunity to move a bill very quickly through this process. And I encourage my Democrat colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and certainly Governor Tina Kotek, to stand with us and do the right thing on behalf of all Oregonians. Thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you.
If you could please stick around, we do